Over 10,000 years ago, there existed a world of unparalleled beauty and prosperity. We know about this fantastically rich island state which vanished without a trace from the face of the earth from the descriptions of Plato, Herodotus, and other ancient Greek scholars. Some consider the accounts of this place merely a beautiful legend, while others believe that sooner or later its whereabouts will be discovered. Who first learned about Atlantis? Did it truly exist? And where is it located now? Hello, dear friends. In today's video, we will talk about Atlantis and conduct our own small investigation to find out where it rests. But before we start this video, we would like to ask you to subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon so you don't miss out on new interesting videos about the mysteries of our world. The story of Atlantis comes to us from the Greek philosopher Plato, more specifically from two of his works, Timaeus and Critias, written in 306 BCE. In his books, Plato wrote that the Greek sage Solon learned about this story while serving as a priest in Egypt. Upon his return, Solon told it to his relative Dropidas. Dropidas then passed it on to his son Critias, who shared it with his grandson. The latter, in turn, shared it with Socrates and his circle. This list should not be taken as a historical or scientific fact, but as Plato's true account. According to Plato's works, the capital of Atlantis was about 10 kilometers from the sea and connected to it by a canal. The city itself was surrounded by a system of circular canals, along with walls to protect it from enemies. The outer earthen wall was clad in bronze, the middle one in lead, and the inner one in orichalcum. Judging by the layout, Atlantis's capital could be called the Venice of antiquity, and the country itself an earthly paradise. Nature was generous to the islanders. They were given excellent land, abundant irrigation, and a temperate climate. The vegetation of Atlantis was so lush that it yielded 2 harvests a year. Even elephants abounded on the island, and its riches attracted people from all surrounding countries. Ships rushed to Atlantis from everywhere. Merchants arrived in such numbers that day and night there was the sound of talking, noise, and clatter. The trading power of the Atlanteans was combined with military might. Human force could not defeat them. Plato, like a meticulous scout, counted the number of soldiers and weapons of the forgotten empire. According to his summary, Atlantis had 10,000 combat chariots, 1,200 warships, 60,000 two-horse teams without chariots, and 120,000 horses. The number of soldiers was as follows: 120,000 heavily armed infantry, 120,000 archers, and 180,000 slingers and spearmen. At that time, this was the best army. Only the Egyptian and Greek armies could stand against it. The inhabitants of Atlantis enslaved, as Plato says, all the countries on this side of the strait. Then, according to the legend, the inhabitants of the country incurred the wrath of the gods because they could not bear their wealth and lost their decency. Zeus decided to impose his punishment on the Atlanteans and destroyed them. The time came for unprecedented earthquakes and floods. Finally, the earth opened up, and in one terrible day, Atlantis was swallowed. The island disappeared, plunging into the abyss. After that, the sea in those places became unnavigable and inaccessible due to shallowing caused by the enormous amount of mud left behind by the settled island. To this day, much has been said about Atlantis. Thousands of research materials have been written. Historians, archaeologists, and seekers have proposed dozens of versions of possible locations around the world, but an exact location has not been named. Why is there such confusion? It all comes down to the pattern that all assumptions initially have a connection to some similarity, under which subsequently the rest of the materials are adjusted. In the end, it turns out that there is a similarity, but there is no Atlantis. We will try to take a different path. Let's begin with the process of elimination, highlighting the places where Atlantis definitely could not have been. As we narrow down the possibilities, we will use landmarks suggested by Plato in his work. Here is a world map as it was envisioned in Greece during Plato's time in the 4th to 5th centuries BCE. So, Atlantis could not have been in some remote corner of the world, and it was not in the Atlantic Ocean either. The inevitable question arises, why? According to the narrative history, the war between Athens and Atlantis could only have taken place in the Mediterranean Sea on this patch of civilization due to the limitations of human development. The world is vast, but civilization is concentrated. Close neighbors often engage in wars with each other, and besides, Athens simply could not have reached the limits of Atlantis with its army and fleet if it were located far away. Water and vast distances would have been insurmountable obstacles. In ancient Greek mythology, which emerged several thousand years later than the time of Atlantis' demise, the hero Heracles accomplished the feat of traveling to the farthest western point of the world, to the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. When Heracles encountered the Atlas Mountains, he did not climb them but instead made his way through, thus creating the Strait of Gibraltar and connecting the Mediterranean Sea with the Atlantic. This point served as the boundary for ancient mariners, symbolically referred to as the Pillars of Heracles, later Pillars of Hercules, signifying the edge of the world. The western limit of the earth that Heracles reached was unattainable for other people. Thus, Atlantis was closer to the center of the ancient civilization. It was in the Mediterranean Sea. But where exactly? According to Plato's description, the Pillars of Heracles, which, according to Plato's narrative, marked the location of the island of Atlantis in the Mediterranean Sea at that time, numbered 7 pairs. They were located at the entrances to the straits and all had the same names, the Pillars of Heracles. These pillars served as landmarks and beacons for ancient sailors. First of all, let us briefly recall that, according to tradition, 9,000 years ago, there was a war between the peoples who dwelt beyond the Pillars of Heracles and all those who lived on this side of them. About this war we are about to relate. As we have already mentioned, this was once an island, greater in extent than Libya and Asia combined, but now it has sunk owing to earthquakes and has turned into an impassable mud, obstructing the passage of sailors who would try to sail from here into the open sea and making navigation impossible. This information about Atlantis, dating back to the 6th century BCE, came from the Egyptian priest Timaeus of the city of Sais, located on the coast of Africa in the western delta of the Nile. When Timaeus spoke of the obstacle from the remains of the submerged Atlantis blocking the path from here into the open sea, referring to himself and Egypt, he clearly indicated the location of Atlantis. It lies in the direction of sailing from the Egyptian mouth of the Nile into the vast waters of the Mediterranean Sea. Next, we rule out other impossible locations. Atlantis could not have been in the Mediterranean Sea north of the island of Crete. Today, in that area, there are countless scattered tiny islands, which do not correspond to the narrative of submersion and, by this fact alone, exclude the entire territory. Additionally, the area north of Crete would not have had enough space to accommodate Atlantis according to its described size. An expedition by the renowned deep-sea explorer, the French oceanographer Jacques-Yves Cousteau, in the area north of Crete discovered the remains of an ancient submerged city. However, based on the information mentioned earlier, it is more likely associated with another civilization rather than Atlantis. Narrowing down the search, we come to the conclusion that only one place remains. Atlantis could only have been in one location opposite the mouth of the Nile, between the islands of Crete, Cyprus, and the northern coast of Africa. The depression of the almost oval-shaped water area with currents flowing from the coasts is clearly visible from the seafloor in space. The bottom in this area resembles a pit covered with soft sedimentary rock without a solid crust of continental mantle beneath it. Only an unfilled depression is visible on the Earth's surface. Furthermore, following Plato's description, roughly in the middle of Atlantis, there was a rectangular plain measuring 580 by 390 kilometers, open to the south and closed to the north by large and high mountains. Applying these dimensions to the geographical map north of the mouth of the Nile, we can infer that the southern part of Atlantis could have been connected to Africa and its northern mountainous part could have been the island of Crete to the west and Cyprus to the east. Supporting the idea that Atlantis was connected to Africa in earlier times, tens of thousands of years ago, is the narrative about the island's animal life. Even elephants abounded on the island, for there was fodder not only for all other living creatures inhabiting the swamps, lakes and rivers, mountains or plains, but also for this creature, the largest and most voracious of all. It is also worth considering that with the end of the Ice Age and the beginning of the melting of the northern ice caps, the global sea level rose by 150 meters, and it is likely that the land connecting Atlantis and the continent was gradually submerged. Elephants and the inhabitants of the Atlantis, who arrived here earlier from the depths of Africa, remained on the large island surrounded by the sea. The Atlanteans themselves were ordinary people of the modern type, not 4-meter giants, otherwise the Greeks would not have been able to defeat them. The island's isolated position prompted its inhabitants to pursue an independent, advanced development, outpacing the external warring barbarians. It is impossible to accurately determine what caused the Earth's activity that led Atlantis to sink into the depths of the Mediterranean Sea within a day. However, it's worth noting that right at that location, along the seabed, runs the boundary of the fault between the African and European continental tectonic plates. Moreover, we know that Atlantis had hot springs of mineral water flowing from the ground. This indicates high seismic activity in the territory that was situated on the thin mantle of the Earth's crust. The depth of the sea in that area is considerable, reaching about 3,000 to 4,000 meters. Perhaps the African plate slightly moved away from the European one, and that was enough to submerge Atlantis into the abyss of the sea. Nevertheless, the Mediterranean Sea basin, where Atlantis once existed, is too deep. Initially rising and then settling on the sea bottom, the mud and subsequent sedimentary deposits gradually buried Atlantis. The Golden City, with its countless treasures in the Temple of Poseidon, found itself at a great depth. The search for the capital of Atlantis in the southern part of the Mediterranean Sea, in the triangle between the islands of Crete, Cyprus, and the mouth of the Nile, could yield valuable results for the world's history, but for this, deep-sea exploration with submersibles is needed. We are confident that sooner or later humanity will achieve this, and perhaps the mystery of this marvelous story will be unraveled. Thank you very much for watching. Dear friends, this is our first video of this format. If you enjoyed it, please like this video and let us know in the comments if you would like to see more videos of a similar format. Thank you, and see you next time.